Hello everyone, welcome back. In the last few lectures, we learned the production process of producers and derived the cost curve from production function. Next, we return to the producer's goal of profit maximization. We know that the profit of the producer is equal to total revenue minus total cost. By solving the cost minimization problem, we have found the cost function of the producer, that is, the minimum total cost to produce a certain output level. How about a firm's total revenue? Obviously, it depends on two variables, the output level and the price level. So, how is the price level determined? In real life, we know some markets are very competitive, and individual producers can only accept the prevailing price in the market, so they have no pricing power. But some other markets are less competitive, and producers have strong influence in pricing. It can be seen that to analyze the behavior of producers, we must first understand the market environment in which producers operate. Different types of markets have different demand curves faced by producers, and the output and the price strategies they adopt are also different. Therefore, we call the following materials market structure, which study the behavior of producers in different market environments. The so-called market structure refers to the interplay of the various parts that make up the market. That is, the characteristics of the market participants, such as suppliers and demanders, and the relationship between them. Usually, we divide the market structure in terms of the number of firms, product similarities, and the market barriers. Generally speaking, the greater the number of firms, the weaker the power of an individual producer in the market, and the more competitive the market is. The more similar the products of each producer in a market, the stronger the substitutability between products, the more competitive the market is. The lower the market barriers, that is, the lower barriers to entering a market, the more competitive the market is. According to the above criteria, we usually classify the market structures into four types: perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly market, of which the latter three markets are also called incomplete competitive markets. First, we discuss what is a perfect competitive market. According to the three criteria we just mentioned, we define a perfect competitive market as follows. There are many producers in the market. The products of all the producers are the same, that is, homogeneous goods. The market has no barriers to entry. All firms can enter or exit the market freely. Second, the monopolistic competitive market is slightly different from the perfect competitive market. The main difference between these two markets is that the products produced by firms in a monopolistic competitive market are somewhat different. We call it heterogeneous products. Third, the oligopoly market and the perfect monopoly market are different from the first two markets in that they both have barriers to entry. That is, existing firms often have the ability to prevent other firms from entering. These features make these two markets less competitive. The difference between these two is that there are a few producers in the oligopoly market, and the products they produce can either be homogeneous or heterogeneous, which means that there is a certain degree of competition between them. In the monopoly market,
there is only one producer
whose product has no similar substitutes. So it is the only producer and supplier in the market, without adding competitors. Observing the characteristics of the four markets, it is easy to find that, going from left to right, the degree of competition of this four market structure is ranked from high to low. So, how exactly do these different market structures affect the producer's decision? In the following lectures, we will analyze the behavior of producers in each market structure one by one. First, we start with the most competitive market, that is, the perfect competitive market. Let's elaborate the characteristics of perfect competitive market a little bit. First, there are a large number of producers in this market, which makes the output of each producer account for a very small proportion of the total market transactions. So each individual producer cannot have an impact on market price. The market price is determined by the overall strength of both market supply and market demand, and each producer can only be a passive price taker. For example, in the wheat market, if the current market equilibrium price is 1 yuan per kilogram, due to the large number of farmers who grow wheat, any single farmer will find that his own output level has negligible impact on the overall supply of the market, and therefore will not change the market price of wheat. The individual wheat farmer will only take the price determined by the market supply and market demand as given, and cannot affect the market price by changing its own output. Second, the products of all producers in the market are the same. There are no differences in quality, style, taste, packing, etc. Consumers get the same product no matter which producer they buy from. Therefore, consumers will only compare the prices of goods when make the purchase decision, which means that every producer in a perfect competitive market has no pricing power. As long as the price of producer A's product is higher than that of other producers, all consumers will choose the producers who sell at a cheaper price. Producer A will not have any customers, so it can only sell the product at the same price as other producers. Therefore, the homogeneity of product has led to the price of all producers in the perfect competitive market must be the same. Third, there are no barriers to entry in a perfect competitive market, and there are no laws, regulations, or resource constraints that prevent new firms from entering the market. When the firm does not want to continue to produce in the industry, it can also freely use its resources for other purposes, thus exiting the industry freely. All producers can enter or exit the market freely. As you can see, the conditions of a perfect competitive market are difficult to be fully satisfied in reality. We can only find some markets that are close to perfect competitive market, such as agricultural products, some basic food and clothes products, etc. Taking the light bulbs of one brand sold online as an example, there are a large number of sellers, and each seller sells the same brand of lighting bulbs online. There is almost no obstacle to open or close an online store. Therefore, when consumers try to buy the lighting bulbs online, they often are most concerned about price, which makes the price of the same bulb sold by each seller very close. according to the characteristics of a perfect competitive market. We already know that alien producers can only be the price taker of the market, and the market price is determined by the overall strength of the buyer and the seller, that is, the market supply and the market demand. Assuming that this is a perfect competitive market, the intersection of supply curve and demand curve determines the equilibrium price, PE. At this price level, the market demand is YE. When a perfect competitive producer A sells its product at the market equilibrium price PE, the demand it faces may be any number between there and YE. If the price set by producer A is slightly higher than the market equilibrium price PE, consumers will not buy alien goods from the producer A, so that the market demand it faces will be reduced to zero. So when the price of a single producer is greater than PE, the demand curve it faces is the vertical axis, which is zero demand. Conversely, if the price set by producer A is slightly lower than the market equilibrium price PE, then all consumers will find that it is cheaper to buy from producer A, so producer A will face the demand of the entire market. In other words, when the price of a certain producer is lower than PE, the demand curve it faces is simply the market demand curve. If we collect the demand curves of the three parts, we can see that the demand curve faced by a single producer is composed of three parts, not like a downward sloping curve such as the market demand curve. On this demand curve, the part higher than PE is meaningless, because without alien consumer, the producer simply cannot get alien revenue. What about the part below PE? In fact, it is also meaningless for an individual producer, because in a perfect competitive market, the supply of the market consists of many producers, and the size of each producer is very small relative to the size of the entire market, which means that the production capacity of a single producer can only supply a small part of the market. So even if alien price reduction lower than PE can obtain the entire market demand, a single producer does not have the ability to meet such a large demand. So in fact, for a single producer, the demand curve it faces is actually only the horizontal part of the curve. Thus, we usually say that the demand curve of a single producer in a perfect competitive market is a horizontal straight line, and its price is determined by the market equilibrium price. This means that at alien output level, the sales price of the producer is always equal to the market equilibrium price. Under given market conditions, this price is fixed. We add a bar on P to represent this constant price. Next, let's discuss revenue that producers obtain from selling product. First, the producer's total revenue, TR, is equal to the selling price multiplied by the output level. The price per unit of product remains unchanged, indicating that the total revenue always changes in proportion to the output level of the firm. Second, the average revenue, AR, obtained by the producer on each unit of product is equal to the total revenue divided by the output quantity. Since the market price of each unit of product is always the same, this means that the average revenue of the producer on each unit of product is also fixed. it is exactly equal to the market price P of the product. Finally, the marginal revenue, MR, refers to the increase in the revenue from the sales of an additional unit of product. It is equal to the derivative of the total revenue with respect to the output level. Since the price of the product is unchanged, the marginal revenue of the perfect competitive producer is also a constant, which is always equal to the market price of the product. Therefore, under perfect competitive market, since the demand curve faced by a single producer is a horizontal line, we can obtain that the average revenue of the producer is equal to the marginal revenue and equal to the established market equilibrium price. Alright, in this lecture, we discussed different types of market structure and the basic characteristics of a perfect competitive market, and derived the demand and revenue for perfect competitive producer. Then a natural question is, how does a perfect competitive producer choose output level to realize profit maximization? We will leave this question for the next lecture. Hope to see you soon.